Good evening and welcome to tonight's shir. Tonight is the Sunday before Rosh Hashanah of Tafshin Pei Dalet. Thinking for next Sunday night there will not be a shir. It's still Rosh Hashanah. I was considering of doing a shir the following Thursday, the Thursday before Shabbos Shuvah. That should help when we have what to say and to share it. Okay, let's go into our shir. So we have our first question. So last Friday, a woman had already benched licht, and she looks around in her kitchen and she realizes that she had not put the cholent up. And so the question is, could she now place the cholent on the hot plate? The hot plate is plugged in. So to place the cholent on the hot plate would be a din d'Rabbanan. Now, generally, we say that you are allowed to do various isurei d'Rabbanan are permitted ben hashmoshes. So hatmona, taking meiser, etc. There are things which one is permitted to do ben hashmoshes. So what's the story with having bench licht? Is it now? There are different levels in Kabbalah Shabbos. There's a level which is basic Kabbalah Shabbos, but not the full Itzuma Shel Yom. At that level, you are still allowed to do those like Hatmona or Tromasomaistris, etc. Once there's a full Kabbalah Shabbos, so the more it says in Poskim, if you daven Ma'ariv, that's a full Kabbalah Shabbos. So after that, you're not allowed to do even Isra D'Rabbanan. Question is, what is the definition of Kabbalah Shabbos of when a woman benches licht? So this is not explicit in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, but we do have here a Kuntres Achren of in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch Siman Resh Samach Aleph, and this is discussed in the Ksos HaShulchan. The Ksos HaShulchan is in Siman Ayin Vav, Ha'ara Yud Aleph. So let's read that inside. So he has to come and I'm explaining what is the dilemma here. Is it a full Kabbalah Shabbos or only a basic Kabbalah Shabbos? So he writes a Kabbalah Shabbos that a woman is mekabel through Hadlokas Neiris, Havi Kabbalas Itzume Shel Yom. This is considered a full-blown Kabbalah Shabbos. The proof to this is that a woman, after she's benched licht, she's not allowed to daven mincha. If it was just Kabbalah Tosfos Shabbos, then which is not as strict, then she should have been allowed to daven mincha. And then he gives a clear, he says, V'chein kosar mefoidosh v'kuntres achren hanal. He quotes the Ran, V'chein kosar Ran behedyo, gabe ner Chanukah koidel ner Shabbos. When it comes Shabbos Chanukah, so we first bench Chanukah licht, and then we'll bench light the Shabbos candles. And he explains, the Ran says there, the lefi shitas bahag, halochas gedeles, lekach ha'adloki hi ba'achareina, mishum sha'achar kach osur lahatmin. Once that the last thing on Erev Shabbos is listed as lighting candles, because after that, so that he says the lashon osur lahatmin, you wouldn't be allowed to, not allowed to light Hanukkah candles, but even to do something which is the Rabbanon. So this the Alter Rebbe substantiates that when a woman is mekabel Shabbos, so it becomes Itzuma Shel Yom, and she's not allowed to do even Eisad Rabbanon. So which becomes like a very interesting, because you have Bein Hashmoshes, which is Sofek Deraisa, and you are allowed to do Hatmon. By contrast, it's before sunset, but you voluntarily accepted Shabbos, and at that stage, you are not allowed to. So your voluntary acceptance of Shabbos, Itzuma Shel Yom, is stricter than the Sofek Deraisa, which is beyond your control. Okay. Let's move on to the next question. So that was what I would like to finish off on this. She was not allowed to, she wouldn't be allowed to put the food onto the blech, onto the hot plate, but it would have been permitted to ask another person, either a goy or lahavdil a yid who hasn't been Makabel Shabbos. You're on the street and see someone come in, can you do me a favor, put it on? And you'll have to tell them clearly, so long as it's not doing it personally, it's beyond your immediate person, that would have been permitted. Good to know these things, because and that's been before talking about Ben Hashemoshes, yeah? Had she realized this half an hour, 3/4 of an hour later, then that license to ask a guy to put it on, etc., wouldn't have been applicable. So here we're looking at the minhag of, well, on Rosh Hashanah during Musaf, once each day, and 4 times on Yom Kippur at Musaf. So there's a minhag of everyone kneeling down and bending down all the way till the head is touching the floor. So here we have a note in Sefer HaMinhagim, the bottom of the screen. For Koirim, we're not noyeg like those who are medakdik, or those are particular to put down a cloth or similar, if it's a ritzpas kroshim, if it's a wooden floor. If it's a stone floor, he refers us to Shulchan Aruch, Arachaim Siman Kuf Lamed Aleph. Our question here is, what's the story about linoleum, ceramic, granite, marble? So we're going to go through those various things. But first, the Sefer HaMinhagim refers us to the Shulchan Aruch Siman Kuf Aleph Lamed Aleph, which talks about Tachn, where it says that one would not be allowed to lipoil al paneim. One should not prostrate oneself totally, even if there's no Evan Maskus. So let's read the Mishnah Brura. Even if there's no stone floor, still one shouldn't prostrate oneself totally. If there is a stone floor, then it's stricter. Then even a kneeling without fully prostrating would also be also. So we've got here, on the one hand, there's a couple of issues here. One thing is about whether it's appropriate b'chlal for to prostrate oneself, and then there's something here about concern, because the Torah says we shouldn't prostrate ourselves on a stone be'artzachem, outside the Beis Hamikdash. So what we're seeing here is that if it's not a stone floor, then bowing is permitted, but not prostrating oneself. If it's a stone floor, even kido, which is not a full bowing, also shouldn't be done. And that's a stone floor. If it's a brick floor, Mr. Burr says it's okay, because the Torah says the word even maskis, and a brick is not an even, as it says about Tehilohem Halaveinu La'oven, by the building of the Tower of Babel. That the word for brick is leveino or le-even. That is an erzatz stone. That doesn't count as a stone. Right. So this is the background which we have here. That for a stone floor would be chomor. Now, when our minhag koirim is not a full prostrating. We don't lie flat. It's bowing with your head down to the floor, but it's not fully prostrating. Nevertheless, if it's a stone floor, that's not okay. And that's the background of the minhag of putting down a cloth. Now, in the Matei Ephraim, and in turn in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, it's written to cover even a wooden floor, etc. Seems to be the broader minhag. So in many communities, they will always put down a cloth, even if it's not a stone floor. And that's the chidush in the Sefer HaMinhagim, that we're not particular about that. If it's a wooden floor, and for that matter, if it's a linoleum floor, or for that matter, if it is covered with ceramic tiles. Again, ceramic tiles are basically bricks made of clay, and therefore you don't need to put down a cloth. What does become an issue is if it's made of granite tiles, which in Eretz Yisrael is very, very popular. They call them the balatot. I don't know where that sounds Arabic to me, but there would be an issue. That's what the contemporary poskim are saying, that if it's made from granite is a composite of many small stones, there they say you should consider it the issur of bowing on stone. And similarly, a marble floor would be also necessary to put down a hefsek min hadin. And the Hemshech he brings from the Mati Ephraim about even on a carpet, to put a shemata on top of a carpet, etc. That's not our minhag, yeah? So we're not particularly in, so if you've got a wooden floor or a lino floor, etc., there's no need to put down a piece of cloth. I just want to, it might sound a bit funny to you. A couple of years ago, they were giving out in the shuls these sheets of plastic to put down. What bothered me was in the corner there was a little sponsored ad by a local phone company or something, and I just want to throw in there is a lashon ein koirim b'shtari hadyatis. You shouldn't be reading ads on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Tov, and just playing on the words of koirim as in with a kuf or koirim with a kof. You shouldn't do koirim on shtari hadyatis. You shouldn't be bowing down on advertisement papers. They shouldn't be in the shul, really. Commercial ads don't belong in a place of tefillah. But that's okay. Coming back. So now we're going on to the next question. It's coming up Sem Gedalia, and in every fast day, we say Aneinu Shmona Esrei. The Yechidim, as individuals in our quiet Shmona Esrei, we only say Aneinu at Mincha, and we incorporate it in the bracha of Shemei Tefillah. Whereas the Chazan says Aneinu as a separate bracha. In other words, there are 20 brachas that morning or afternoon. He says it both at Shachar at Mincha. Now, what happens if there was a sleepiness in the rest of the shul, and no one realized that the Chazan missed Aneinu? Okay, if someone realized before Shemei Tefillah, so then the Chazan will incorporate it in Shemei Tefillah. What happens if the sleepiness was so much that they came already to past Shemei Tefillah? Oops, middle of Moedim. So what do we do now? So I'm going to read first the Mogen Avraham, which is the top of the screen, and then we'll go down to the various other sources. V'im shochach gam b'Shemei Tefillah. Oimro brocha b'fnei atzmo achar ba shalom. Says the Marshal that you say Aneinu as a freestanding brocha straight after ba shalom. Now, he gives a reference. This is not the Mogen Avraham talking. Look in Simon. Now, this is Mogen Avraham in Kuf Yud Tes, in Dinim of Shachris Shal Chayil. But he refers us to the Tur in Tov Kuf Samachay, which is the Dinim of Tanis. The Yesh Oimrin, that even a Yochid should say Aneinu as a 20th brocha after Basholah. And indeed, that we don't follow that opinion, the Yochid. But a Yochid will not say Aneinu as a 20th brocha after Basholah. At least B'Shatz, B'Shliach Tzibur, one can rely on that, because it's not as if out of sequence, because the sequence is finished. Okay, so this is the Mogen Avraham quoting Marshal. If Aneinu was forgotten at Shemei Tefillah, it is said as a follow-on, straight after Hamvorech Chasam Yisrael Bar Shalom. That's the Mogen Avraham, and here the Alter Rebbe is quoting the same halacha. V'imshocha gam b'Shemei Tefillah, oimro brocha b'fnei atzmoi achar Bar Shalom. that you say it as a standalone bracha, which bepashtus means with Baruch Atah Hashem, Mo'in Lam Yisrael Beis Tzar. That's bepashtus how you read this. It's bracha bifnei atzma. Whereas when you read the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, so then in Siman Chof, in the name of Shacharis, he talks about the Anenu. It belongs in between Goyal Yisrael and Reifei Chele. And then he says, if you forgot to say it, then you included Shemei Tefillah. Then he says, if you forgot it there too, Oimro la'achasiyum atfilo below chasimo, that you don't say Baruch Atah Hashem at the end. So this is now different to what we've been saying till now. Yeah, till now we've been saying Baruch B'fnei Atzmo, and now we say below chasimo. That's what the Kitzur writes. Now I've mentioned several times that the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch is has three sources: with the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, the Chaya Odom, and the Derech HaChaim. Those are his. Usually, you can find what he writes in one of those sources, at least in the Chaim section. So now let's take a look at the Derech HaChaim. The Derech HaChaim was written by Rabbi Yaakov of Lisa, I believe, contemporary of the Alter Rebbe, and it was published. It became a very popular sefer. It was a precursor to the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. And Avrom David Lavut, when he published the Torah Siddur, he published together with it the Shar HaKoilo. He also published together with it in the same volume, he published Siddur Derech HaChaim. But a chassid he was, and therefore he made his business, that's probably why he did it, to have a comparative column in the Derech HaChaim, wherever is at variance with the Alter Rebbe. So he publishes Derech HaChaim im Nesiv HaChaim. So now what we have here is the Derech HaChaim. He's saying, if you've forgotten Shemei Tefillah, say it another as a separate bracha, Beloy Chasimo, before Lekhain Etzah. And you don't it's not inserted between Shemei Tefillah and Etzah. On this point where he says without a Chasimo, the Rabbi Avram David Lavut writes that the Alter Rebbe says, Oim Rabocha B'fnei Atzmo, Acha Basholem. So he's and what he's trying to say is that you say it with a Chasim. So, and this is also Reb Chaim Noah of much more recent times, going back 70 years ago. So he, in the Luach Kol Chabad, he also writes, Shochach Gam Shom, if you forgot to say Anenu, even in Shemei Tefillah, Oim Rabrocha B'fnei Atzmo Achar Sim Sholem, which Brocha B'fnei Atzmo means with Hashem's name at the end. So what my takeaway from this is that the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, which was recently reprinted with Psokim of the Alter Rebbe, included with Minhag Chabad, this I believe is falling short of what the mission statement of that sefer, because to say that, just to say Acha Basholem, that's not enough. It should say that the Alter Rebbe says you should say as a bracha b'fnei atzmo, which means with the chasima. Okay, so hopefully in the next edition that will be corrected. So the next question is, someone asked, when you do Netilas Yadayim, is it necessary to see the chalas of the table that they are on? Now, the question didn't include whether he's talking about the Shabbos, and you're talking about washing Netilas Yadayim after Kiddush, or just Netilas Yadayim on a weekday, nothing to do with Kiddush. And this is a very common thing by you come to a bar mitzvah, a chasana. So the washing facilities are often quite far from where you are going to eat. So I know in America it used to be very popular that the caterers would put a tray of cubes of hamotzi near the washing station. I don't remember whether they still do it, but let's read the halacha as it is in Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch in Siman Kuf Samach Vav. Now, everyone knows the Lashon HaGemara, Teikef L'Netilas Yadayim Brocha. Sholish Tkifai saying there are three things which should be next to one another. Somoch, Teikef Le Geula Tfila, Teikef L'Smicha Shchita, and Teikef L'Netilas Yadayim Brocha. In that phrase, Teikef L'Netilas Yadayim Brocha, there are two ways of learning. Does it refer to Maim Achroinim, or does it refer to Maim Rishonim? Again, when it says Teikef L'Netilas Yadayim Brocha, which Netilas Yadayim does it mean, and which Brocha does it mean? So this is what he says. Yesh Oimrim. Also with the Maim Rishonim, one should also be particular, like with Maim Achroinim, because in the Gemara it says that one who succeeds in having Netilas Yadayim close to the Brocha, he won't be harmed in that meal. That's only logical to apply for the washing before the meal, because to say that at the end he's already finished his meal and he's washing Netilas Yadayim, my Machronim, right before benching, or he won't be harmed from that meal. The meal is over; he's eaten already. It's unlikely talking about it'll be a reaction after he's eaten. Therefore, there's this approach that also by Maim Rishonim, by Netilas Yadayim, there should also not be a unnecessary interval between the washing and Hamoitzi. So let's read therefore, therefore one should be careful not to be mafsik, afilu b'shehiyah kedei hiluch chov beis amo. One shouldn't have an interval, even the amount of time it takes to walk 22 amas, because that is considered a hefsek. That amount of time is a hefsek, even if you're sitting put. The source of the 22 amas has got to do with the Beis Hamikdash, where you'd have a case where someone brought a korban who cannot enter the Beis Hamikdash, cannot enter the Azar, as he or she is standing by the gate. And then till the point where they are able to shecht it, something like that. It's got to do with from the gates. You got as a Yisrael 11 amas, as it's Kohen 11 amas. So it's 22 amas until the Mokim Ashchita. So that's the source of Chav Beis Amo. So one shouldn't make a pause unnecessary pause more than or as much as the amount of time it takes to 22 amas. In the bracket, he says, if you walk from one house to another, that's considered a hefsek, even if it's a little bit of walking. We've discussed this a few times, that shinei mokim is a hefsek. Then he says, v'sheloi l'tzoyrech, ein lahafsik av shfila b'shehiyah mu'etes. So really what we're seeing here is three levels. There's a hefsek sheloi l'tzoyrech, even a minimal hefsek shouldn't be done. If it's a hefsek l'tzoyrech, but not l'tzoyrech eating, it's l'tzoyrech for something else, then you want to close the curtains, let's say. I don't know. One should, why? Because you need some privacy when you're eating. Good, that is a tzorech, but it shouldn't be a pause of more than the amount of time it takes to walk 22 amas. That's a hefsek l'tzoyrech, but not l'tzoyrech achila. Then they have a hefsek l'tzoyrech achila. Now let's read that inside carefully. I would like to address this carefully because, as I say, by public functions, chastas, etc., it's very negaya. If the pause is related to the meal, the needs of the meal, that's not called a hefsek. Even between the broch of hamoitzi and eating the bread, much more so between the washing for bread and the subsequent broch of hamoitzi. The pause from which is needed for drying your hands and the walking from the washing station till where you're eating, where you're going to be sitting, einon chashuvin hefsek. That's not called a hefsek. Kivin shehu tzorech hasuda. So even walking a longer distance from the washing station till where you are eating is also not a hefsek because it's tzorech achila. that walking is needed to get to rather than having to stand and eat somewhere in the corridor, which is not exactly gentlemanly. Right. One should wash as close as possible to where you're dining, etc. And Baruch Hashem, in many Hamish halls, they have installed sinks inside the room rather than having to go a distance. Akoponim. So, is there a question of shinui mokim between netilo and hamoitzi? So there's a preference to wash close by, but if you're washing in one room and going to another room, that's not a problem. If that's necessary, that's okay. Personally, I sometimes, I'm going to a hasna or something and I'm washing by the washing station, which is quite a distance. So I'll take with a couple of tissues and keep on wiping my hands until I come to my place. In this way, I've kind of minimized the hefsek between. Now, if next time you go to chasna and you see some tissues under the table, you know who to blame. Okay. Now, that was between the Tis Yadayim and Hamoitzi. Then with the question about between Kiddush and Hamoitzi. Now, here's a different issue. There is a din of Kiddush has to be b'mokim su'udah. Now, is it justified to leave the place and you're going to come back again? And in between, you've broken the Kiddush b'mokim su'udah sequence. This is now in a separate concern. And this is discussed in Sporim. And what I have here is a quote from the Sefer Kitzur Halachos Mishulchan Aruch Admor. This is written by Rabbi Yaakov Horowitz, who lives in Rishon LeZion, published about 30 years ago. Very, very good sefer, perhaps a bit more, 40 years ago. Very good sefer, a digest of Hilchos of Shulchan Aruch, Hilchos Shabbos, from the beginning of Shabbos until Havdalah. So he writes there that when you go out of the room, it's very common to go out of the dining room to the kitchen, let's say, which is a different room, but you have every intention of coming straight back, that is not considered shinui mokem. Therefore, you are allowed to leave the dining room in order to wash in the other room and then come back right away. Although the Magen Avraham and Alter Rebbe write that going out between Kiddush and Hamoitzi is a problem, possibly there is talking about where he did not have intention to eat right away. When the intention is to eat there right away, that the going out of the room momentarily is not a problem. So I hope that's made to give a bit of clarity. The pause is not a problem. Now, having said that, it would be correct, as you see, to minimize the amount of interval. Therefore, when we wash in Tis Yadayim and everyone's waiting for the balabais to make hamoitzi, it would be correct for the bnei hamishpacha to also bezrizes to wash as soon as they can, so that there shouldn't be unnecessary waiting around between the Tis Yadayim and hamoitzi. Let's move on. So so we'll skip something. Number 5. Okay, number 5 was a question. I don't have anything on the screen. A Jew wishes to buy an apartment. This is somewhere in Russia, and his small town. There's a new development there of apartment buildings, and he wants to buy. He's got the money, Baruch Hashem. He wants to buy an apartment, but the rumor has it that site used to be a cemetery. So, of course, the first question is he a Kohen? The answer is no, he's not a Kohen. So, is there any issue? Now, generally, a mace is also b'hanor. We're not allowed to have benefit from a mace. That possibly applies to Goyim. You may remember we had once a discussion about using bone for some kind of dental implant, and bone being taken from a dead body. So, there is an issue of a mace is also b'hanor. Does that mean the grounds become sacred? Does that mean that after they've been dug over, etc. That's much less. I wasn't so confident about this. I did a bit of a search, and I found in the rather contemporary sefer called Mishnah Halachas from Reb Menashe Klein, that Rabbi Baruch Oberlander, soll sein gesund, who's the Shliach and Rav in Budapest. So he had been asked about, he was asked by a developer who wanted the city, Budapest or whatever it was, had land which had been used for burial, and now they had put it up for sale for development. Now, we're not dealing now with the morals of doing so. They had decided that this land is available for development, and the Jewish contractor, developer, was asking whether it's legitimate. And Rav Klein in his tshuva goes through a lot of discussion. Do we have to worry that there might be some Jews there who are Jewish remains there? Possibly. On the other hand, could be that the remains have disintegrated to the point that there's nothing left there. He goes through a whole back and forth. His end conclusion is that basically it is okay, but as an extra, the buyer, the contractor, or whatever, the developer, should stipulate with the city authorities that they should plow over the land before purchase happens. So they will destroy any trace of visible trace of the cemetery, and then he will be. So I just see this with Kal V'chomer. If there he's even allowing to buy a plot and have it, which they are going to first plow over for sure. Once there has been already, the building has been built, there shouldn't be any question of his Hanoah on the land built over it. It's just that he won't be able to have Kohanim over for lunch. Okay. That doesn't seem to be the top of his priorities at the moment. Okay, this might be a bit of a surprise about rolling. Someone brought it to my attention about rolling up a beard on Shabbos. Now, I never really thought much of it being a problem, but here Reb Chaim Noah, in one of his later volumes, Chelik Ches, he argues that just like we know that we're not allowed to make plats on Shabbos, and that comes under the issue of boina. So he's asking, when rolling a beard and making it into some kind of structure, why is that different to boina with plats? So that's his argument. It should be also to roll a beard on Shabbos, and he doesn't see why it should be different between a man and a woman. Then he says, it can be Melamed Chus, because not everything you do with the hair is called boina. It's only if it's a more widely accepted thing, people make such a kind of structure. But since something which is not so common, therefore that wouldn't be called boina. And therefore, that in fact you have here a few individuals who roll their beards. He says there's so few, that doesn't make it into a recognized tikkun. So he says because it's not so common, therefore it's not called boina. So again, he argues at first the rolling a beard should be the same as making a plat, and therefore should be called boina. He says because it's not such a normal thing to do, therefore it's not called boina. So then he goes, all right, so he's got a heter for the rolling of the beard. But then he says, I hear that the people also, not enough they have to roll the beard, they also have to use a hornodel. They use some kind of hairpin, which women normally use for keeping their tichel in place. And he says, well, then I have a problem of going out in the street with this, because it's not considered a normal form of dress. Are you doing it in order that the hair should stay in place? But then he says, since he said that it's not a normal behavior to roll your beard, therefore you can't say that this is a derech levisha. So the heter to allow you to roll the beard now works against you to say that putting the pin is not called derech levisha. So he does make a problem with it. That's how he remains with a problem. So that's Reb Chaim Noah. Now, on the other hand, we've got here a reference to the Piskei Tshuvos, And I think it's in Simon Shin Aleph. Shin Aleph, I think Sif Lamed, I don't remember exactly now. But he talks about this. And he says that it's also permitted to use a pin to keep a yarmulke on the stuck to the hair, or to keep your tie in place. And those who fold their beards, roll up their beards, and put a bobby pin or an elastic band. Hold it. They have authorities upon whom they can rely. So, but then in the footnotes, he actually brings Reb Chaim Noah, who's not okay with it, which is the whole thing was like for me very, very interesting. You see him, it's all very well for him to say it's very unusual. I can think of many people who do roll their beards, and I know that a lot of them also use pins to hold it, or to have clips to hold them in place. And Chaim Noyes, it doesn't sanction it, but there are others who disagree. Okay, I'm not sure how they would answer his timeless. I know, Boyne is interesting. So yeah, so he says pinning the yarmulke to the hair, that is, we'll say it is quite common, but here he makes a whole building of. My main concern is how do you get out of the boina? Why? How can you define why rolling a beard into a roll is different to a plait? I don't think a plait. I always under the impression that the plait is because they're folded over and there's a whole structure there. Rolling a beard is, I think, a much simpler pu'ula. So I'm curious if someone out there has any further insights on this, but we're going to go on. Okay. So someone writes to me that they read in some kind of book that putting challah, burning on your stove, makes the stove treif. Well, we know that the challah is also for us to eat because it belongs to the kohen. And then this book says, put it in the garbage. The garbage is burned in any case, so it's going to be burned at the other end. Now, I have not done homework on this, whether the garbage in this country ends up in an incinerator. I know that there's truckloads of garbage coming out of every street every day, kind of thing. We'd like to have it more frequently, but the amount of garbage that's produced in a metropolis is huge. I've yet to see these massive incinerators with all the smoke going up. I haven't seen it, so I might not be I might be missing something. We should be seeing somewhere in the country incinerators burning garbage. I believe they have other ways of disposing of it rather than burning. But even if they do, so now we have here from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, I think it's Simatov Kovov in Hilchos Yom Tov. He says that if you take challah, you're allowed to make a dough on Yom Tov. You take challah, don't burn the piece of challah on Yom Tov. Afal pi sheyesh mitzvahs asay bisrei fosa. There's a mitzvah in HaTorah to burn challah. If challah has become tomei and inedible, there's a mitzvah in HaTorah to burn it. Why can't you burn it on Yom Tov? The answer is because Yom Tov is a aseh v'lo aseh. So although there's a mitzvah to burn the challah, but that doesn't override the mitzvah of Yom Tov, of not doing malacha unnecessary for Yom Tov. But what we're seeing here is there's a mitzvah in HaTorah of burning challah. Therefore, if it's a mitzvah, you shouldn't really be giving it to the guy to do. You should be doing it yourself. Now, just to get support, as you see, I always like to get contemporary sporim. There's a very nice sefer called HaKashrus, or Rabbi Fuchs, and he writes that it's customary to singe the challah to burn the challah on the stove, or to put it inside the oven, not at the same time where things are baking. But there's no question of anything becoming treifed up when you put it on the burner on top. because it's being burnt. How do you kasha things by burning? I don't see how you make things treif by burning. It's being burnt, so there's not going to be any residue. So I don't see that as a problem. Putting it in the oven, it has to be at a time when there's no food baking, because otherwise the taste, flavor from the challah could be shared with the food, when that would be an issue. Now, as I was thinking about this, you're saying that there's a mitzvah to burn challah. So why don't we say a bracha? Sheket shana b'mitzvah sebesivano, lisrei fesakadoshim. I was intrigued. Why is there no? If it is a mitzvah to burn challah, why don't we say a bracha upon doing so? So I searched on the Yotzer HaChochma, and it brought me to this volume, some kind of journal, and where this question is asked. And actually, there's a machlokas whether this idea which the Alter Rebbe says it's a mitzvah to burn. So it's not according to all the Rishonim. According to some Rishonim, it's a mitzvah to get it out of trouble, but it doesn't have to be dafka burnt. Whereas that seems to be Rashi's opinion. Whereas Tosfos says it's a mitzvah to burn it. But then it's why no bracha. So here Rav Moshe Feinstein in Igros Moshe addresses this, and he says a very nice svara. When you do a mitzvah in the right way, you make a bracha. Sheket shana says as well. No, but here what happened? You were mafresh challah. You should have given it to the kohen, but it became it's tummy. Then the kohen's tummy. The kohen can't eat it. So unfortunately, because we can't deal with it in the proper way, therefore we're going to have to burn it. Well, that's not really the ideal of the mitzvah, and therefore burning kodshim shenifsalu is not the kind of thing which you make a bracha on. It's not the ideal way of doing the mitzvah, and therefore it doesn't deserve to make a bracha. That's Moshe's svara. I don't have any raya one way or the other, but I think it's a very nice svara. Right. So here was a question number 8. So a chazan, this is Beis Chabad, a shliach, and he's often davening at the Omid, and usually they have a minyan. Came to Yeshtabach, he looked around, he couldn't see, he only saw 9 people, so he went on straight into Yotzer. And right after he said Yotzer, and then suddenly saw Nukus. No, there's somewhere, someone had been sitting like behind a column or something. The point there was someone there, he didn't notice. So there were 10 people. So he says what he did before Hameir La'aretz. So I said Kaddish and Bochum. And he asked me, did I do the right thing? So at first I thought he did the wrong thing, but upon reflection, I think he was right. The reason being that truthfully, the whole union of interrupting in middle of Sukkot Zimra or Bichas Krishma for Dvorim Shebekadusha is not discussed in the Gemara. In Gemara, it talks about Mishnah, you're allowed to interrupt in the middle of Birchas Krishma to greet someone out of fear, out of respect, and poskim after the Gemaras to explain that it cannot be that Kavod Shamayim should be less than Kavod Basavadam. Therefore, when there's a call to interrupt for Kavod Shamayim to the glory of Hashem, then you'll be mafsik. Okay, that's the basis of it. So, just for example, if a person is called up to the Torah and is in the middle of Vichas Krishma, so he goes up. All right, so the advice is that he doesn't read along with the Balkoira. Rely on the Rosh, whatever you rely on the reading of the Balkoira. But what happens, and this is from Mr. Brewer, this is Simon Samach Vov in Hichas Krishma. If there's a Sefer Torah now on the table, on the bima, and there's no one else capable to read, to learn, and you are in the middle of Vichas Krishma, she says, absolutely, you should be mafsik. you should go over and lane. You should try to finish off the section where you're in the middle of, and also don't be the gabbai to call out people by name. Okay, that can be delegated, but you don't interrupt. So you are on you are capable, and therefore you rise to address the need of the tzibur, even though you are middle of Yichas Krishma. So now, what happened in our case? That the Yishtabach was said, the minyan was there. There's a need to say the Kaddish and Baruch Hu. That need was overlooked, and it can be done. So he is now, Taki is in the middle of Yichas Krishma, but you should still interrupt to say the Kaddish and Baruch Hu. I've mentioned a few times I've got this specialist sefer on mistakes in davening. It's a 2-volume set called Shkiyos Miyovin. And I looked there, and this mistake doesn't come up. What it does come up is that was a case where the Chazan finished, he forgot to say Kaddish. And so, does he say Kaddish now? He skipped it. And of course, Rav Elyashiv, that he is obliged to say Kaddish. I believe it. So, and he says a word. There's the idea of a shliach, is a shliach tzibur. A shliach tzibur, like every shliach, is there for the benefit, not for the detriment of those who appointed him. And therefore, he's authorized to say Kaddish. He's not authorized to skip Kaddish for them. He's not authorized to deprive the tzibur of their Kaddish. And therefore, it has to be said, and he should say it. Okay, that's so much for the various shadows of this past week. I wanted to go back to the business of the gap in the parsha of Shema in the Tefillin. Now, I recalled, I wasn't so clear about this. Now, according to the Alter Rebbe, it seems to be quite clear that this is lechatchila permitted to have. The Alter Rebbe talks about having a gap of 9 letters, but it seems to be quite clear from various sofrim, etc., that it doesn't mean dafkanai can be more than 9 letters, and it's still called a stuma because v'hoyim shamoya is inset. That's the Alter Rebbe's position. If you want to do more reading about this, I'm sure I didn't manage to find before last year, there is a sefer by Rebbe Levin. So if you can see on the screen, it's called Shiurei Halacha L'Maisa. So volume Aleph. So there he's got several pages exploring and explaining the Alter Rebbe's Shitta, which way how to do the spaces in the parshas of Shema and V'hoyim Shemoya, and the difference between the space in Tefillin and the space in Mezuzah. I suspect because in the Mezuzah they are in the same scroll and one following straight after the other, so that makes the difference. But okay, but he does discuss it in great detail. It's about 5 pages. Okay, so you can read it over there. So that's I'm trying to correct what I said last week, where I'd said that this is. It's my impression was it's kosher b'di'eved, but not l'chachila. That's true according to other poskim. According to the Alter Rebbe, this seems to be the l'chachila way of doing it. Okay, what else do we have? So also from last week, so there had been this discussion about a person who was very limited for time before mincha about saying ketores after davening, or saying ketores before the zman. So one of our listeners by the name of a Mr. Rabbi Waxer from New York, I believe, tells us that when he got married, Zalman Shimon Dvorkin was the Rov, and Rabbi Zalman Shimon had told him as a chosen he should say ketores before the half hour, and then right from the half hour he should start davening mincha. Possibly Zalman Shimon felt that this chosen needed to have more time to get through mincha in time for the chasna. I don't know the details, but anyway, that's just an extra source. And I've mentioned last time, I was told that the Rebbe, when the Rebbe would give out dollars, So they would do mincha start ashrei bang on time, which would mean that Ketores had been said earlier. Fine. So then someone had asked me, what's this? Generally, we don't encourage skipping stuff in order to catch up with the minyan. Now, that's absolutely true. There is a siman in Din Shulchan Aruch. If a person comes late, what they can skip in Pesukei de Zimra, etc., in order to catch up with the minyan. And yet there is in the Meforshim, the Mebar Heitev, they bring from the Arizal that one should daven al Haseder. So here you have this dilemma. A person has come late, should he skip to catch up the minyan, or should he daven al Haseder, even though it means he's going to miss davening with the minyan? And the general trend in Lubavitch has been to take that, and there's a couple of letters of the Rebbe. There's a letter of the Rebbe to Rabbi Dubov, who was a mashgiach in yeshiva in Manchester, and he saw the bochrim sometimes would come late, and if he would tell them, so he tell them to skip. He didn't know what to do. And the Rebbe tells him, halacha, and he quotes, the Rebbe refers to a sefer called Shari Tefillah, which is written by someone called Rekeach, a Svardish sefer printed in Livorno. The Rebbe refers to that sefer, who lists, and looked it up last night, he lists 91 poskim who tell us that one should skip in order to catch up, to be able to daven with a minyan. And the Rebbe says, despite that, but he's worried about what's going to happen the next day. The bocha knows that he can skip to catch up, but that's going to become a habit. He'll come late and skip. So the Rebbe doesn't embrace that approach. So the question is, what do you do? All right, is there a difference? This is really what the question was. Is there a difference in skipping Halukah and Ojel Shir, or skipping from foreign, as we call it in Yiddish, skipping Ketores, skipping Al-Qaeda, L'Olam Yehei Odom? And is there a difference between skipping in the body of Sukkot Zimra or skipping Ketores, etc., the preliminaries? So my response was that I don't have a logical svara to differentiate, because the idea is Seder Oilimus, and unless you know your way very, very well, the Pashtus, there's a Seder Oilimus, and everything till Haidu is connected to Olam Hasi, and everything after that is whatever, Pesukei de Zimra is Olam Yitzir, etc. So that one shouldn't be skipping, that's true. I'd like to say, however, that although the Rebbe is talking about in that letter to Rabbi Dubov that by skipping it's going to cause more skipping and more skipping, I'd like to just say that while I'm looking around in our community, I'd like to encourage people to, people come late and they they have to read this, they have to do that, another thing, and as a result, they are out of a habit of actually being late for the minyan. Whether they're needed for the minyan or not is irrelevant. They're missing out on Tefillah B'tzibur because they've got this tardiness, which is it's a habit. I know some people are that way inclined, and some are not. But actually, to Dafki insist that you have to, everything has to be ala seder, and not to compromise at all in order to daven the minyan, I think that's something which may be taken to the other extreme. So I'll leave that point. I think I've said more than I should be saying, but fine. Let's finish off with the question of the riddle. What's the connection between Tisha B'Av and Shmini Atzeres? So one of our dedicated listeners observed that the tune of Ata Hores Olodas seems to be similar to somehow sees a similarity, and that was, he saw it also in some contemporary book, and so that was the beginning of the question. I mentioned right at the time that when I was in Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael in Tafshin Lamed Tes, so there's a minhag to go to if you're people to go to the coastal during Chol Hamoed. So my Zayda Alav Shalom lived at the time in Kfar Chabad, I think. So he schlepped me with. Very happy to go with him. We went to the Kaisel, and because the idea of Aliyah L'Regel, the Alter Rebbe actually mentions it in Shulchan Aruch, quoting the Ran, that even Ad HaYom there's a minig of Aliyah L'Regel that at least Yom Tov you come to the Beis HaMikdash, to the Mokim HaMikdash. So it happened to be that I was Chazen in a minyan by the Kaisel. I was Chazen, and for Musaf. So I sang the Loshe, the Nusach, B'nei Veischa Kavad Chila, V'chein Mikdoshcha Al Mechinoi. So my Zayda, afterwards, he says, what's this niggin? It's Elitzio in Yoreha, Moisha B'tzireha. It's very much the same tune of from Kinnis, from Tisha B'Av. So since then, I try to, when I'm in a chazan, I try to steer away from invoking the nigun of Elitzim V'areha in middle of Shalosh Regalim. But coming back, I'm not so sure whether there is the same tune or not, but there's something more deeper than that, and that's what I'm sharing with you, which the person showed me this source. Now, I'm going to go a little bit over time, but you'll hopefully find it fulfilling. There is someone who's by the name of Rav Moshe Wolfson. He's he's in his 90s. He was Rosh Hashiva in Torah Vodas. In Tovshim Nim Beis, the Rebbe said a Sicha, Masiyim Masechas Shabbos, and I and a colleague by the name of Levi Yitzchak Yunik, who lives in Montreal, we had a teretz on the Akasha which the Rebbe had left open. So we went into the Maskiras, and we said we found a couple of Sforim which talk about this question which the Rebbe had left open. So Rabbi Groner, Olav Shalom, he asked us to make a photocopy of the front page of the Sefer, as well as the item in the middle of the Sefer, which addresses the question which the Rebbe had raised, which we did. So one was a Sefer called Ben Yehoyada, and the other one was an Ashkenazi Sefer, I remember now, by someone called Shapira. At any rate, so I wanted to share with you this word from Rav Moshe Wolfson, and so I put up on the also the front page of his Sefer. Okay, so now let's see what he says inside. Really, I'm very impressed with what I can see here. I'm just very briefly, he says in the Jewish calendar, we've got days which are polar opposites. We've got Shmini Atzeres at one side and Tisha B'Av at the other side. Now he says Shmini Atzeres is actually the pinnacle of the Yom Tovim. You've got the Shalosh Regalim, Shana Yom Kippur, they're all a hachona, preparation for Simchas Shmini Atzeres. And this is like the center of the circle. Now, he's very brief here, but he says it's not called Chag. You know, there's a discussion in the Gemara about Pazar Kasav, that Shmini Atzeres is not a Chag bifnei atzmai, but he's taking the word Chag as in a circle. That Shmini Atzeres is higher than the circle. All the other Yom Tovim are a Chag, they're like the circle. And Shmini Atzeres is higher than all of them. He gives references to some Sofer, to Ramamifano. So Shmini Atzeres is the highest of all of these, of the days of the celebration of the year. Now, the Tisha B'Av, this one skipped pieces. Tisha B'Av is the polar opposite. It's a day of division, it's a day of destruction, a day of darkness, and here in Simchas Torah you have a Chosan Torah, it's gleaming and shining and happiness. And you have the opposite is a person who's upset and embarrassed and dark and stooped. So that's the spirit of Tisha B'Av. And then he says we have the Arizal revealed to us that Yirmiyahu is a Gilgul of Shlomo HaMelech, and the night before the inauguration of the Beis HaMikdash, that was when Shlomo HaMelech married the daughter of Parai. And now it says in Novi that Shlomo HaMelech overslept, and his mother rebuked him. Lemuel Melech, the whole thing that he overslept. And why did he oversleep? That was the night after he got married to the daughter of Parai. Now, it says in the Gemara that when Shlomo Melech got married to Bas Paroi, so then it says that Gavriel comes down and he stakes a staff in the sea, and that became how do you say, a land. There was a land built up, and that's the Kerech Godel Sheremi. That was the basis of Rome. So Shlomo Melech, when he gets married, but there was unfortunately then the negative aspect of him getting married with Bas Paroi, which was actually the beginning of the Churban. That was the beginning of the build-up of the power of Rome, which eventually brought the Churban. So we've got here a spiritual, interesting connection of Yirmiyahu and Shlomo HaMelech. And so again, I'm skipping parts of it. So now we have a different perspective of Tisha B'Av. If Yirmiyahu is a Gilgul of Shlomo, so then Tisha B'Av, in a sense, is like a Gilgul of Shmini Atzeres. And indeed, it will be transformed, the Simcha. It'll be transformed to a Simcha similar to Shmini Atzeres, as discussed in the beginning of this article. So Tisha B'Av is an exalted day. At the moment, it's with black clothes and covering, but there is a hidden goodness there. And so this is you can look up the Sefer yourself if you want. It's called Emunos Yitecho. It's got several pages, but a fascinating connection between Tisha B'Av and Shmini Atzeres. And so that's a deeper answer to the connection. I wish you all a ksiva v'chasima toivo, l'shana toivo mesuko, and we should meet in good health. Mit Mashiach Tzidkenu, Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi, B'meher Yameinu Mamash.